history reveals a pattern of major government collapses over the last 250 years. A recurring theme is leaders underestimating the risk of their government's downfall. This underestimation often stems from a lack of awareness. Leaders may also ignore warning signs due to overconfidence or denial. Such misjudgments can accelerate a government's decline. Understanding these patterns is crucial for preventing future collapses. In 1799, France was a dominant power in Europe, wielding significant influence. It was also a global center for advancements in both art and science. Despite its strengths, France faced internal vulnerabilities and challenges. These internal issues threatened its stability and overall dominance. In 1804, the French government experienced a rapid and complete collapse. This collapse occurred within a relatively short time frame of just 5 years. The political instability led to extreme consequences for the monarchy. The King of France was executed as a result of the government's downfall. Widespread political violence and chaos ensued throughout the country. In 1917, Russia was a large empire ruled by the Tsar. The country was experiencing immense social and economic strain. This period marked the beginning of the Russian Revolution. The revolution aimed to overthrow the Tsarist regime. In 1917, the Tsarist regime in Russia collapsed within a mere 8 months. This collapse led to a devastating civil war across the country. The ensuing conflict resulted in over 20 million casualties. The rapid downfall marked a significant turning point in Russian history. The Civil War deeply impacted Russia's social and political landscape. The collapse and war caused widespread suffering and instability. In 1959, Cuba was a relatively prosperous Caribbean nation. The Cuban economy was functioning effectively at the time. Cuba also benefited from foreign investment in its economy. This economic activity contributed to its regional prosperity. The nation's stability fostered a favorable climate for business. In 1961, Fidel Castro overthrew the existing government in Cuba. This coup established a communist dictatorship in the country. The communist regime lasted for more than 6 decades. This marked a significant political shift in Cuba's history. The French, Russian, and Cuban revolutions share a 6-stage pattern. This pattern transcends different centuries and ideologies. Despite unique contexts, core phases remain consistent. Analyzing these stages reveals underlying revolutionary dynamics. Comparative analysis highlights shared revolutionary trajectories. A revolution involves a complete collapse of the existing system. It also requires the subsequent replacement of that system. It is not simply a protest against the current regime, nor is it just an election changing the government. A revolution is a fundamental systemic change. It transforms the power structure and societal norm. Revolutions often arise from a gap between public expectations and reality. This disparity fuels discontent and a desire for change. When perceived opportunities fall short, frustration intensifies. High expectations coupled with limited progress can spark unrest. The greater the gap, the higher the likelihood of revolutionary action. Revolution becomes a means to bridge the expectation-reality divide. Significant inequality between elites and the general population can trigger revolutions. A wide gap creates social tensions. Extreme disparities can become unbearable. This unbearable tension can lead to widespread discontent. Discontent can fuel revolutionary movements. Revolutions often aim to redistribute resources and power more equitably. Revolutions arise from a loss of faith in the existing system. This loss of faith stems from the system's perceived inability to reform. The system fails to address critical issues effectively. People conclude that the system is fundamentally broken. This leads to widespread discontent and a desire for radical change. Revolution becomes a perceived necessity for societal progress. John F. Kennedy stated, "Those who make peaceful reform impossible make violent revolution inevitable." This quote highlights the critical need for societies to allow peaceful change. Preventing peaceful reform can lead to frustration and potential violent uprising. The quote emphasizes the importance of addressing grievances through non-violent means. In 1780s France, stark inequalities defined the social and economic landscape. The clergy and nobility, comprising the privileged classes, owned most of the land. These elite groups were exempt from paying taxes, enjoying significant financial advantages. Conversely, the Third Estate, encompassing commoners, shouldered the entire tax burden. This system created immense economic strain and resentment within the Third Estate. The unfair distribution of wealth and taxes fueled social unrest and discontent. In 1788, France faced a severe harvest failure. This poor harvest led to a dramatic surge in bread prices. Bread prices doubled, making it unaffordable for many. Millions of people were unable to afford basic sustenance. This widespread food scarcity fueled social unrest. The French elites enjoyed a life of extreme luxury. This opulence stood in stark contrast to the widespread poverty. Many commoners faced starvation and extreme hardship. The disparity fueled deep social resentment among the poor. The elite's extravagance was seen as insensitive and unjust. This resentment contributed to growing social unrest. France faced bankruptcy due to extensive wars and financial mismanagement. King Louis XVI responded by increasing taxes to address the financial crisis. The tax burden disproportionately fell on the peasant class. The elites, including nobles and clergy, were exempt from these taxes. This inequality exacerbated social tensions and resentment toward the monarchy. The French political system experienced a breakdown due to an inability to enact reforms. The failure to implement meaningful changes led to systemic issues. This breakdown signifies a critical stage in France's political history. The inability to reform had significant consequences for the French system. The educated middle class initiated a rebellion against the established order. This rebellion marked a significant shift in societal dynamics. A key factor was the widespread erosion of trust in traditional institutions. This distrust created a vacuum of authority and stability. Extremist factions began to capitalize on the instability and public discontent. These groups gained influence by offering radical solutions. The French Revolution's execution phase involved widespread use of the guillotine. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette were publicly executed. Their executions marked a turning point, symbolizing the end of monarchy. Following the royals, numerous priests and nobles faced the same fate. Political rivals and perceived enemies of the revolution were also executed. Napoleon seized control in France, marking a pivotal shift in the revolution. His ascent signified a transition from revolutionary ideals to autocratic rule. The revolution's initial goals were subverted as Napoleon established a dictatorship. This transformation concentrated power, altering the course of French governance. Under Napoleon, France embarked on a series of wars, expanding its influence. These conflicts reshaped Europe and solidified Napoleon's legacy as a military leader. Pre-revolutionary Russia was marked by extreme wealth disparity. A small elite class controlled a disproportionate amount of the nation's wealth. This concentration of riches left the vast majority of the population impoverished. The peasant class, comprising most Russians, owned virtually nothing. This economic imbalance fueled social unrest and resentment. The vast gap between rich and poor contributed to the revolution. Russia's leadership under Tsar Nicholas II was a significant problem. The Tsar's leadership was characterized by corruption. Incompetence further plagued the Russian leadership at the time. These leadership issues contributed to Russia's challenges. Stage 3 involves the Russian army turning against the state. This defection significantly weakens the government's authority. Military opposition undermines state control and stability. Such actions can lead to further instability and regime change. Stage 4 in Russia was marked by a significant decline in public trust. This decline specifically targeted Russian institutions. The loss of faith created widespread disillusionment among the populace. This widespread disillusionment ultimately fueled revolutionary sentiment. The Bolsheviks successfully garnered widespread support. This support came from the Russian population. This support was crucial for their rise to power. The Bolsheviks promised peace, land, and bread. These promises resonated with the war-weary populace. Government collapse triggered a civil war in Russia. The civil war was devastating and widespread. The conflict resulted in over 10 million deaths. The collapse led to widespread instability. The Civil War represents a major historical tragedy. In 1950, Cuba had a high standard of living compared to other Latin American countries. This prosperity reflected a relatively developed economy at the time. However, the distribution of wealth within Cuba was notably uneven. Significant disparities existed between different social classes. This unequal distribution contributed to social tensions. Despite overall prosperity, many Cubans did not benefit equally. Corruption was widespread in Cuba, especially among the elite. Those connected to Batista were particularly involved. This corruption permeated various levels of society. It contributed to widespread discontent and instability. Elections were canceled, eliminating a key democratic process. Protests faced violent suppression, further eroding political freedoms. These actions undermined the legitimacy of the Cuban government. Political suppression curtailed citizen participation and dissent. Castro's movement gained widespread support as Cuban institutions weakened. The loss of legitimacy in institutions fueled Castro's rise. Public trust eroded, creating an opening for Castro's revolutionary efforts. This stage marked a critical shift in Cuban political dynamics. Batista's departure marked a pivotal moment in Cuban history. His flight created a power vacuum in Cuba's government. This opened the door for Fidel Castro and his forces to seize control. Batista's exit effectively ended his regime and ushered in a new era. Castro initially promised democracy for Cuba. However, he ultimately established a dictatorship. This involved seizing private property from citizens. Opposition to his rule was met with executions. These actions consolidated his power. Cuba transitioned away from its initial democratic promises. Cuba has experienced over 60 years of authoritarian rule. This period began under the leadership of Castro. The system consolidated power, limiting political freedoms. This era has significantly shaped Cuba's political landscape. Revolutions often fail to deliver on their initial promises and goals. They can result in widespread violence, bloodshed, and societal chaos. Unintended consequences can lead to new forms of oppression. The post-revolution state may replicate old power structures. Idealistic aims are frequently subverted by practical realities. Revolutions are often spearheaded by extremist leaders or factions. These leaders tend to prioritize radical change over gradual progress. Extremists often focus on dismantling existing structures and systems. Their emphasis is frequently on destruction rather than constructive building. This focus can lead to instability and challenges in post-revolution periods. Constructive building requires a different skill set than revolutionary destruction. In 1980, the top 1% of Americans held 8% of the total U.S. wealth. As of today, the top 1% controls a significantly larger share, 32%. This indicates a substantial increase in wealth concentration at the top. Wealth inequality in the U.S. has grown significantly since 1980. The United States exhibits a significant disparity in wealth distribution. Wealth concentration is skewed towards the very top percentile of the population. Specifically, the top 0.1% holds a disproportionately large share of wealth. This elite group possesses more wealth than the entire bottom 90% combined. This stark contrast highlights a substantial wealth gap in the U.S. economy. Such concentration raises questions about economic equality and opportunity. Trust in Congress is at a historic low in the United States. Public confidence in the courts is also at a historic low. These lows indicate a potential crisis of legitimacy. This situation may be described as Stage 2 corruption. U.S. Stage 2 faces significant financial challenges. Insider trading contributes to financial corruption. Lobbying practices can exacerbate corruption issues. Corporate capture further promotes corruption. These factors contribute to a $36 trillion national debt. Corruption and debt pose major threats to U.S. stability. The U.S. government is shifting its focus. It increasingly prioritizes the interests of donors. This shift occurs at the expense of serving its citizens. The government is more responsive to donor needs. The U.S. middle class is facing economic challenges. Education often leads to significant, lifelong debt. This debt burden contributes to financial instability. High debt is a factor in the decline of the middle class. Housing in the U.S. has become unaffordable for a significant portion of the population. The high cost of housing places a substantial financial burden on many individuals and families. This unaffordability exacerbates existing financial strains. Unaffordable housing contributes to economic inequality. It also limits opportunities for upward mobility. Addressing housing affordability is crucial for improving financial well-being. High healthcare costs are a significant economic burden for many U.S. families. These costs can lead to financial instability and even bankruptcy. The financial strain exacerbates economic pressures on the middle class. This creates a cycle of debt and economic insecurity for families. Addressing healthcare costs is vital for economic stability. U.S. Stage 3 is characterized by wage stagnation. Wage stagnation means wages are not increasing. Simultaneously, asset prices experience rapid growth. Asset price explosion refers to a surge in the value of assets. This includes real estate, stocks, and other investments. The combination widens the gap between the wealthy and the working class. Revolutions often start with the educated middle class. This class typically possesses awareness and resources. A key trigger is a feeling of betrayal by the existing system. This betrayal can stem from unfulfilled expectations. It may also arise from perceived injustices or lack of opportunity. This sense of betrayal fuels revolutionary sentiment. The U.S. is currently experiencing widespread distrust in its core institutions. This distrust extends to the media, a primary source of information for the public. The courts, which are meant to ensure justice, also face skepticism. Elections, the foundation of democracy, are being questioned by many citizens. Law enforcement agencies are struggling to maintain public confidence. This institutional distrust poses a significant challenge to U.S. stability. Stage 4 signifies a critical fracture within the United States. The nation is no longer unified but fragmented into opposing factions. These camps exhibit deep-seated animosity towards each other. Despite inhabiting the same country, they are fundamentally divided. This division permeates various aspects of social and political life. France, Russia, and Cuba, despite perceived differences, followed similar collapse patterns. Each nation believed its circumstances were unique, setting it apart from others. However, historical analysis reveals shared trajectories leading to their respective falls. Understanding these parallels offers insights into potential vulnerabilities and risks. Reaching stage 4 in a national cycle presents a critical juncture. Historically, reversing course at this stage proves exceptionally challenging. The momentum of the cycle makes intervention extremely difficult. Past examples underscore the near impossibility of halting the progression.